If you drive your children to school, do not be on your phone. Don't be on Bluetooth. Because basically the message to your kids is whoever's on the phone matters more than my children in the car. And kids will say that. And kids will also say things like, my dad's boss swears all the time. It's really funny. Or I found out we were having a surprise vacation because my mom was talking to my aunt. Or I found out my parents were getting divorced because I overheard it on Bluetooth. We forget that our kids are in the back of the car. So get off your phone. It can wait. And on the flip side, if your children are under the age of 10, don't have them be on their phone either, unless you have like a really long commute to school, because that's really important time for children to connect to their parents. Your introverted, quiet kids will connect in silence. And it is a mistake to think that just because they're not saying anything, why can't I call my sister and chat? Because it's in the silence they feel connected to you. And as soon as you disconnect from them in silence, they will feel like they don't matter.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Burke. Welcome to the Family Dialogs podcast. In a world where screens are always on and our attention constantly divided, one wonders what happened to those quiet moments that build strong families and lasting connections. In today's episode, we will be exploring how the digital age is reshaping childhood and family life, and most importantly, how we as parents can protect the heart of our home. To help us with that, we are delighted to have with us today Catherine Steiner-Adair. She is a clinical psychologist, consultant, and the author of the book, The Big Disconnect, Protecting Childhood and Family Relationships in the Digital Age. Welcome to our podcast, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
So I'm so happy to have you here because I think I am a parent. I have a 19-year-old in university who I'm still worried about, and I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And since having my first child, oh my goodness, so many things have changed on the digital space. And it's changing so quickly that parents, I think, are feeling overwhelmed and a bit left behind as it relates to how they can navigate the space to ensure that their children are protected. So you wrote the book a couple of years ago. What did you see then that made you, got the urge to write the book, and how have things changed for the good or bad since then?
Speaking quite personally, the first thing that made me think about writing the book was my own experience as a mom in 1998. Windows 98 had just come out. We lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There was an announcement on the radio when I had my children in the car for carpool on the way to school. The first 98 people outside of this building at MIT would get Windows 98 for $98. And my son had just had his bar mitzvah and said, Mom, I have money for educational purposes from my bar mitzvah. I'm going to be one of those 98 people. I said, Daniel, MIT is a very big place. How do you think that will happen? So he came down at dinner and made a proposal to us and said, Daddy, you will sleep on the street with me, and Mommy, you will bring coffee and donuts. And we did it because we wanted to support his, excitement about computers. So in comes Windows 98 and in comes gaming at a new level. This is in the old days where you could beat a game. They actually stopped. So he beat this game called Command and Conquer. And I realized, wow, that's unusual for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid. But what was that was sort of intriguing to me. What was just totally distressing to me was that I would watch him dysregulate, getting off of the gaming. And I'm trained both as a developmental and clinical psychologist at Harvard. And it seemed to me like his gambling brain was lighting up when he was playing games. And there was no research on this at the time. But, this really reasonable, easygoing kid suddenly became obsessed with gaming and acted like a toddler, having a tantrum when we said no. So that worried me because there was no research then on the neurological impact of these games on kids' brains. The next thing that happened was my daughter came into our room at night. She was in 7th grade, shaking. And this is a very sturdy little girl, handed me a piece of printout and said, Mommy, I don't know what this means. And I don't know who it's from, but you need to make it go away. And it was a really sexually aggressive, threatening, awful message. Well, it turned out to be a lyric from a song from a boy who had a crush on her. I figured it all out. But the important thing was, it was really hard to figure out where it came from because it wasn't from within our school community. And I realized, wow, parenting has changed in ways we are not equipped to handle. People who don't know us, don't know our children, can reach out to them. And these games are hijacking children's ability to play outside. So those were my 2 personal parenting experiences that made me think, wow, things have changed really massively. Then in my work as a therapist, kids and grown-ups would come in and show me these text wars. And I saw how dysregulated people are on texting and how people are texting things that either they shouldn't say or should be said face to face. So I decided to do a deep dive and do research. And I was very lucky because I've consulted to many, many wonderful independent schools in America, and they let me in. And I did a ton of research, and I would leave often in tears thinking, oh my gosh, this is so sad. You know, little 6-year-olds saying things like, I guess Daddy doesn't like taking me to the park because he's always on the phone when he's pushing me on the swing. You know, older kids saying, you know, I really hate it when, like, I'm on the ski lift with my father and I have to say, come on, Dad, this is like father-son time. Can't you get off your phone? So I heard the urgency and the frustration in children trying to reach their parents. And, you know, as I said, I was just heartbroken so often. So I wrote the book and I thought, oh gosh, what if it's too late? You know, what if everyone is so addicted to this and just thinks it's so great and they're only worried about the kids, not worried about the parents missing their kids or setting limits? So I was really surprised when the book was a, you know, best nonfiction book of the year with the Wall Street Journal and got all these rave reviews. And the Wall Street Journal tends not to pay a lot of attention to books about parenting. And I called them and said, this is great, but can you tell me what about it? And they said it was that I really was looking at also the child's perspective, what it's like to grow up in the digital age and how really hard parents now have to work to understand technology, to keep their kids safe on technology, and also to keep families connected in a fun as well as meaningful way. And that's a huge challenge. And that has only gotten worse. And gaming has gotten worse because the gaming industry realized that don't let your games end. That's how we make money. Keep them addicted and keep them on the game. And as we all know, the vitriol and the hatred and the racism and the misogyny on social media is really harmful, really harmful. And kids are 5 times more likely to look at and pass on mean stuff than they are nice stuff. So, you know, we've seen the spike in anxiety and depression and self-harm and body dysmorphia and all these things. And, yeah, things have gotten worse. The one thing that's gotten a little bit better is parents are outraged and really calling on the industry to help them set better limits. And that is happening in some areas, in some countries more quickly than others.
As you were speaking about the different stories, that's one of the things I did appreciate about your book. There was one story at the beginning of the book that really broke my heart, and I think is so applicable to many families. I don't remember if you had a child in a therapy session, and I think they had to describe their family, and he basically described each parent in different parts of the room, so one in each corner and a sibling in the other corners, and then he's in the center with his dog, and only the dog was giving him attention. And I thought, oh my goodness, I think so many children relate to that now. Even though when you wrote it many years ago, I think it's probably even more profound now, considering with all the other advancement that have occurred since then. What do you describe? How would you describe the big disconnect? What is it, in case parents are wondering?
Sure. So the big disconnect is we have disconnected from having our primary relationships be with one another. And now our primary relationship is with our phone. We check our phones when we wake up. We feel separation anxiety if we don't have them. We take them as adults into the bathroom. Worst place for phones, they fall in the toilet and they get wet, etc. And children are competing with phones for their parents' attention. And parents are competing with their children's phones and devices for their attention. So we've lost that primary connection that prior to this, families had much more access to. It was much easier. And when you watch TV together, people say, well, what about TV? It's completely different. It's neurologically different. It's socially different. When we're watching TV, we're all watching the same big screen. And we talk about it during commercials and we connect during it. And it doesn't disrupt our brains. Very different. So that's the big disconnect. The big disconnect is from the primacy of family and family values and family relationships to the digital devices and primary connections to social media or friends or gaming or whatever. But kids don't describe their family connections in the same way as they used to. Nor do parents. And everybody's suffering. It's not like everybody's Yahoo, no more family time. Everybody's suffering.
So as it relates to how the children and the parents how they describe each other, what's the difference you see in parents? Because children will say they're competing with their parents' a time and attention with their phone, and it doesn't feel like they're bonding anymore. But for the adults, how are they describing that relationship, and what's the change there?
Well, parents are extremely frustrated. One of the biggest changes for parents is so much homework now is on a device. And the devices often don't have firewalls. So kids are multitasking, talking to their friends, looking at YouTube, whatever they're doing. And parents know that this is not good and it's not good academically, but they're frustrated because schools send kids home with devices or online homework and they feel like kids can't self-regulate. They can't. So that's one big challenge for parents. But the main challenge for parents is that they have a very hard time setting limits with their kids around tech use because their kids dysregulate and throw such a fit that parents keep caving and are frustrated. And the other thing that's so hard is most parents don't know how to set up and use the parent controls that are out there. One of the things I tell schools, I consult to schools all over the world. One of the things I suggest to schools is that you have your own school genius bar, where once a month, any parent can come in, work with your tech people, and learn how to set up parental controls on all the family devices. It's really frustrating, overwhelming when you have, a slew of devices in your house and you don't know how to control your kids' use. And that is a huge frustration with parents. The other thing I hear parents say that's heartbreaking is children don't want to do family things because they're not as, quote, fun. So when you compare playing Sorry or a board game, it's a popular game here, or Monopoly or whatever, a board game or a card game, to playing a game on a handheld device, they are completely different experiences. The device is a neurological stimulant to your brain. And as a species, we love our stimulants. So every time on a device, even if it's a so-called educational thing, like edutainment is what we call it, like, matching lowercase a to uppercase a for your 5-year-old, if they do it and get the answer right, a little bird will start tweeting, or a little horn will blast, or a little stardust will fall. Those are all neurological stimulants, and kids crave that. They crave the ping. So if you don't have those pings every time you do something right, learning and playing in the real world feels not as reinforcing, duller, and, parents complain they can't get their kids to go for a walk or go kayaking or, just do something, go to a movie, do something off of device. And we see by the age of 5, kids who play on devices all the time and don't play in the real world with their hands, building things and drawing and whatever, that they have a very hard time in school because they expect the teacher to reinforce them with pings, basically. Yeah, kindergarten teachers say to me, I need a bucket of gold, sprinkle dust to throw at these kids because they're constantly coming. Did I get it right? Did I get it right? Did I get it right? And they can tell, who has frustration tolerance, who can pay attention, who can do a rebuild when the blocks all fall down, who can wait their turn without interrupting, who can follow 3-step directions without falling apart. Those are the kids who don't grow up on devices for the first 5 years of their life.
And as it relates to the teachers, because I've been seeing some shorts, or I don't know what they're called on X, but I'm seeing teachers specifically saying they're not teaching anymore. What they're doing is actually regulating behaviors because they have to spend so much time addressing behavioral issues, dysregulation in the classroom, that by the time they're done, they can barely get through their education plan for the day, which means then that the children's education is now being disrupted and they're now falling behind because the time that is needed to go through the program is no longer possible because of the dysregulation. We see the dysregulation as the external result. Maybe parents are wondering what specifically is happening in the brain that caused their children to they might describe their children as going crazy, losing it, don't know what is going on with my child. Why are you behaving so frantically? What is happening in the brain that's causing the child to respond like that when you say time is up, it's time for you to go to bed or do, quote unquote, a boring activity?
So what's going on in the brain? Well, it depends on whether they crave the gaming and looking through social media and YouTube, but it's all basically the same thing, which is the devices are highly addictive and they make their money by keeping you on it. It doesn't matter what you're doing. They don't care what you're doing. They don't care if your kid's looking at porn or, playing Candy Crush. They will make money as long as your kid is on the phone or on the device. And they are designed neurologically to tap into the addictive brain. So that when people, have to go through withdrawal, or when we come off of stimulants, we are cranky, angry, moody, throw fits. It all depends on your wiring. Sullen, you name it, crazy. So the little brain is getting a detour in development. And it's a very serious one, especially for learning, like you described. Because if you develop a gambling brain, you need constant reinforcement and you're going to get crazy when you go through withdrawal. It's pretty simple. What's not simple and what's very serious is the more kids are on devices and their brains get addicted to the neurological stimulant, they are not developing the self-soothing and self-regulating skills we need for learning. Learning is frustrating. Think about when you learn to tie your shoe, which now you don't need to because we have Velcro, but think about a zipper. It's hard. Learning to ride a bike, hard. You have to repeat. And on the game, you just hit reset and it's done. It's instantaneous and off you go. So what we see is that the meltdown is a neurological meltdown in the part of the brain that's the same part as the gambling brain, from the withdrawal of the stimulant. Now, on social media, the withdrawal and the craziness is from FOMO, from fear of missing out, from kids feeling like they're going to be the only one who doesn't know something, or if they don't like somebody's picture or something like that, there'll be backlash or they'll be the next victim of bullying. And that is a psychologically addicting thing and a socially reinforced behavior that makes it very hard for kids to feel like they're, quote, you're taking away my life. Teenagers will say, you're taking away my life. You don't understand. You're ruining my life. I cannot live without my phone, even at 2 a.m. And that is a psychological dependency on phones that are also very serious.
Quick break for listeners tuning in. I have a question for you. Are you a subscriber to this podcast? If this conversation is resonating with you, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Drop a 5-star rating and leave a quick comment. It really helps other families find us and keep these conversations growing. If you want to continue the conversation, you can join us on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Taniesha Burke. Thank you so much. Let's jump back into it. I'm thinking too that not all children might go through the dysregulation all the time. So what are some key characteristics you see of children and maybe their parents showing that they are too addicted to their screens or they as a family are going through disconnect? Are there other traits other than dysregulation that we need to look out for?
Sure. I mean, you want to look at how much time a family spends together off devices. Where is it sacred in your schedule? Is it family meals? Is it in the car on the way to school? Is it on the weekend? Is it, sometime quiet time at night? Where do you have a tech-free time and zones in your house? The kinds of things you worry about are when you've got, a parent and a bunch of kids or 2 parents, whoever's in the house, and everyone's on their own device from the minute kids get home from school till bedtime. And that's too much. It is too much. And, from there, the wiring of a child, like kids who have ADHD or ADD or kids who are at risk because they're in families that don't accept their identities, whatever the issues, they are more vulnerable to the ADD, ADHD brains, more vulnerable to addiction. And we want kids who are isolated in a family to have some social connections online. And, for those kids, getting them off the phone, it's much more like, separating them from the only lifeline they have, which is a very different issue. When parents walk in the house on a device, which so often they do on their way home from work or in their earbuds, that's a sign too. You're not coming home from work. You're bringing work home. And again, little kids and older kids will say to me, I don't run up and hug my mom or dad anymore when they come in the door because they always go, shh, shh, quiet, honey, this is important. I'm at work. Like, seriously? That's a moment of really important connection when you come home from work to greet your children, to be device free. And the problem, of course, with these devices, as wonderful as they are in many ways, you and I are doing a podcast across the pond, we've lost the boundary between home and work. So it's very hard for grownups to turn off from work. And, the question I always ask parents is there anything that urgent that you can't put up an away message for 2 hours or 3 hours when you walk in the door, have dinner with your kids, bathe them, talk to them, help your kids with homework without distraction? Because that's what kids need. And you really have to be honest with yourself and your colleagues and say, I am unavailable during these hours. If you're on call for an emergency, if your doctor on call, if, it's complicated if you're working, in a different time zone than you live in and things come up at work. But those situations, I think, are maybe about 20% of the time, and 80% of the time, it's just that feeling that, and this is the addictive piece of it, as soon as the ping goes off on your phone, the part of your brain that lights up says urgent, urgent. It's not the part of your brain that says, whoever that is, they can wait. You know, we did research. Why do people, why, before we had Siri, right? And people were using their phones in their car, you know, we wondered, like, why would somebody pick up a phone or text and drive at the same time? And it's because when your phone goes off, the part of your brain that lights up says emergency. And I interviewed parents who said they forgot the kid was in the back of the car and they were worried they had forgotten the kid at school. You know, so that is a very primitive part of our brain. And it's really being exploited beautifully by folks who are developing the algorithms that make our phones buzz. Think how many stupid spam phone calls you get, you know, and do you pick them up? Even if you don't, which I hope you don't, they're still really disruptive. They're annoying and they take your attention away from whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. One of the things I hear come across as you were sharing is the whole issue of lack of boundaries. Mm-hmm. So it's to say, hey, if I'm going home and between 5 and 9, unless it's a serious emergency, you will not hear a response from me or a phone call from me after this particular time. And I think sometimes parents forget what it's like to be children.
Totally.
And so they think it's just a 5 minutes. They think it's just a quick scroll on whichever device. But discouraged children are usually disconnected. And sometimes parents think, okay, they're not having externalizing behavior, so all is good. But then you do have the children who internalize everything and might be thinking, I really don't matter in this family. I'm not really appreciated. And then they go inward even more. And that's where they become more addicted to whatever they're doing online, whether it's chatting with friends, going in these anonymous apps to talk to people they don't know, just to have a sense of connection. So I think parents don't realize the importance of children needing to feel like they matter. For the parents who have been listening to us now and they're thinking, oh man, I'm guilty of everything Catherine described, what can they do to start making the shift in their relationship? And some might say, I know I need to make the shift, but oh my God, I am not looking forward to the meltdowns and the power struggles and the blow-ups in my house. So I want to do it, but I'm scared of what I need to do. And what is that I need to do?
It goes on both sides. We need to do things with our children, set better limits with them, and we also have to do it with ourselves. So the first thing I want to talk about is what parents can do. I think these are relatively easy. I tried to go like, what are the most user-friendly changes parents can do that respond to the times kids feel like they don't matter? Like what you said, Taniesha, is so important because our kids don't need our attention 24/7, but when they need us, they need to know they matter. And when we're with them, they need to know that we want to be with them. So the first thing I would say, some of this is kids and parents. I don't know what it's like where you live, but if you drive your children to school, do not be on your phone. Don't be on Bluetooth. Because basically the message to your kids is whoever's on the phone matters more than my children in the car. And kids will say that. And kids will also say things like, my dad's boss swears all the time. It's really funny. Or, I found out we were having a surprise vacation because my mom was talking to my aunt. Or I found out my parents were getting divorced because I overheard it on Bluetooth. We forget that our kids are in the back of the car. So get off your phone. It can wait. And on the flip side, if your children are under the age of 10, don't have them be on their phone either, unless you have like a really long commute to school, because that's really important time for children to connect to their parents. Your introverted, quiet kids will connect in silence. And it is a mistake to think that just because they're not saying anything, why can't I call my sister and chat? Because it's in the silence they feel connected to you. And as soon as you disconnect from them in silence, they will feel like they don't matter. Your extroverted kids, will start to probably tell you things and talk about their anxieties. And you can ask them, who's going to be quarterback today or whatever it is, but they will rattle off their little minds with you. And it's a very important time in the car, same as when you pick them up. Kids hate it when parents or caretakers pick them up from school and they're on a phone. It's like, it's so rude, talk about not being present to your kids. So that's one thing in the morning. The other thing I would say, even more so, before you get in the car, get up before your kids and do whatever online stuff you need to do. If you need to check in at work or carpool or whatever. But when you're with your children, from the time they wake up to the time they're out of your sight, don't be on the device. That is a really potentially stressful time for kids. They can't find their backpack. They don't know, whatever it is. And they need you to be fully present and help them, soothe them, comfort them, reassure them as they eat breakfast, get dressed, and you drop them off. So the next thing is, this is for kids. Well, I'll do parents. So when you come home, don't walk in the door. I already said that, on a device. Like, stand outside your house, but don't walk in plugged in, because you want your kids to feel like you're coming home to them, not bringing work home. Bedtime, bath time. Kids complain all the time about having phones at story time. And even older, like adult children, talk about, like, when they say goodnight to their parents and their parents are digitally distracted, they hate it because they can hear the flat tone of voice. Good night, honey. Sleep well. Versus, oh, good night, hon. Sleep well. So mealtime, don't be a hypocrite. I can always tell when kids know the word hypocrite because they'll say, my parents are such hypocrites. They say no devices at the table and they're always taking a call. And, really think about what are the memories you want to create for your children about rituals you had, routines you had, places you went, walks you went for. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be Friday night movies, and pizza movie. It doesn't matter, but hold to it and create them and protect them. You need to work as a parent to really think about what's the right amount of family time to sustain the kinds of connections. It's like front end loading. You need to build these relationships because as your children grow up, you have a 19-year-old, they hit big bumps. They have huge heartaches. They have big disappointments. They don't get a job. They get, the love of their life breaks up with them. If you have not created ongoing relationships with them, they're not going to turn to you. And they're not going to turn to you when they're in trouble. Too much drugs, alcohol, meanness, bullying, sexual harassment. They're going to turn to their friends or online. And you want to be the person they go to for advice when they are hurting. Because people online don't have your values, don't know the age of your kid. They will not answer questions in the same way you would answer questions. And you want to be that go-to parent. So you have to work at that by creating and protecting time as a family. Every family should have a responsible use agreement. Are you familiar with these? Taniesha, is that something common where you are?
Yes. So, for example, you don't use the electronics when you're having dinner. There's a electronic zone in your house where when it's bedtime, you put all the devices in a basket and, not having the children use a device at least an hour before bed so they don't become dysregulated, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that you want to do when you write that and agree with that, and you revisit it as your kids grow, is also have your children say what they want from you, because we live in relationship with one another. And it's really important that children feel, this is another thing about mattering, which is a favorite word of mine as well. You want your children to feel empowered to say, I don't like it when you do this or that. And if they can do that with you and you respect it when they're young, they're going to be able to protect themselves when somebody sexually harasses them or wants them to get in a car with a drunk driver or, all the stuff they're going to face in college and in the workplace after. And children need to have the experience of having the things that they feel are unfair or unsafe or uncaring respected. And this is an area where it's really good to have the family agreement be a mutually developed family agreement. And one of the things little kids say all the time is, you can't be on your phone when we're playing a game. Understandable.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was reflecting about my relationship with my 19-year-old, because some of the things that you mentioned, I can attest to. You were mentioning the family dinners. We had a policy where at least 5 meals of each week we had together. And I remembered he would complain, especially on a Sunday, oh, Premier League football is on and all my friends are watching. And we had to be firm to say, hey, family meals. Right. We can wait until there's a halftime and then we eat family as a family and go back. You can go back to your game. And the beautiful thing about the family meal, it was also that we didn't really notice it when he was with us. Now that he's away at university, he's getting compliments about his ability to speak up for himself, how confident he is. But he developed that because he would have some serious back and forth debates with my husband at dinner time. And they will play on each other and say, no, that won't work. And they'll talk about politics, philosophy, and all of that. So in addition to bonding, he actually developed other soft skills that he probably would not have, developed fully unless he was like in debating club and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of skills that your children will develop. And as you mentioned, he's now in university and I am the first person he calls, hey, this is what is happening. And he will have me as a little person that, some of his friends are not able to really share with their parents what's going on. And so he would ask my perspective about it. And I did not realize how powerful that would be until he left the nest. And so if we did not make the effort to do that bonding, he's in Canada, so he's on the other side of the Atlantic. He would not have seen the need to call me and to ask for this kind of advice. So I think parents are really underestimating the importance of even family meals, just to sit and talk over a meal together and have your children feel like they matter. Another thing that I thought about when you were talking, I remembered about 3 years ago, there were a lot of stories about boys experiencing catfishing, where they would be speaking to people online that they thought were teenage girls. And then there would be some kind of ransom thing to say, if you don't send me $100, I'm going to release your messages and your photos. And I saw a couple news articles where some boys actually committed suicide, unfortunately, because they thought it would be the worst thing to talk to their parents about. And, you have to wonder if in some of these families did they feel like they mattered enough, or they could bring the worst of the worst to their parents without feeling judged. So there's a whole world of messiness that's out there that your children might have access to, and they're more likely to get attached to it if they feel that they don't matter anymore to you.
Absolutely accurate and very scary. And, that's how do we protect childhood when our kids have access to the entire adult world and really dangerous, creepy people have access to them?
Our home is more protected than the device that they use. Absolutely. So we lock the doors, the windows. Some of us might have security cameras and alarms, but we don't have the same level of protection that we have in our home on our devices.
I cannot say strongly enough, that I absolutely believe it was those dinners and those arguments and those discussions and having his different opinion listened to and respected that set him off so well to university to know how to self-advocate and to know how to hold on to his own position and obviously also to be such a good friend to kids who didn't have the advantages of those kinds of relationships. one of the things I say often is like, when you're setting these limits and your kids are crying and saying you're ruining my life, they're not going to write you a thank you note for doing that. But it is my experience personally, as well as professionally, when I interview kids, the gratitude of older kids, young adults say, I'm sorry I was so awful. I'll tell you a funny story. It's a different kind of story, but my younger daughter was shy and introverted and didn't like having her picture taken. But every now and then I would say, we have to do this. You trust me. So one day I was like up in my office seeing patients. I come down, she has this very serious face on, and she says, Mommy, I owe you such an apology. I thought, oh, what? Did you break my favorite tie? I could not imagine. She said, I'm sorry. I was so awful when you wanted to take my picture because I've spent the last 3 hours looking through these pictures and I'm so glad you have them. And now she's about to have a baby. We're about to move in with them for 6 weeks to help them with their first child. And she has all these pictures now, of herself in her early years. And so you really have to do.
Yeah, set the limits. And, as we were speaking, I remembered one for me too, where parents, don't be afraid to be the bad parents, quote unquote, bad parents, and set the limits, because they'll say, all my friends are doing this and I'm missing out. One story that we had this no phone policy in the bedroom, and I can tell you what my eldest did. What he did, he had to put it obviously in the living room, which our bedroom is close to. And Catherine, at 3:00, he set the alarm, 3 a.m., 3:05, 3:10, as his way of fighting back that we set the limits, because his friends were allowed to have the devices in the bedroom. So he was missing out on all those late night conversations. But he did thank us for it, because we also noticed that throughout the day, his mood was better. He didn't look so sluggish and tired and so on. Yeah. But he actually thanks us for setting those limits. Now at 19, before he thought we were too strict and we were the strictest parents and nobody in his crew had such strict parents. But now he's grateful for it. So you have to develop a tough skin to be willing to be the quote unquote bad parent. You know what you're working towards in the next 10, 20, 30 years, who they're going to be. So there are certain decisions you have to make now to get that outcome later on. And you might have to go in your own room and cry and say, oh God, that's a bit tough, but it's the right thing. He said really messy things to me or whatever, but I just have to know, okay, don't take it personally. Yeah. It's for his own benefit. So I think two parents really have to armor up themselves to realize you are fighting against an addictive device. And at the same time, do you want to have a young adult when they're no longer in your nest who is really struggling with anxiety, struggling with attention and all of that? Or do you want to equip them with enough social skills and life skills that they're able to function well? And you're not parenting for the rest of your life in the sense of having to manage their emotions and manage their life, even though they're no longer living with you. Yeah.
One of the things that I discovered after catching my son going down to the living room to get his stuff, my recommendation to parents is take all the devices, including your own, and stick them in the master bedroom on silent, because kids will go down to the charging station and do exactly what your son did. Either set alarms to wake you up and drive you nuts, or they'll just sneak in, get the device and put it back, so, and that's normal. And kids, you want kids to be rebellious. You want kids to push it up against the limits. And that's what's really hard, because they're really good at pushing up against the limits, and they make you feel, it's so easy to make you feel either bad or so frustrated with the endless arguments that you cave. And the good thing about having that responsible use agreement, I always say, put it on the fridge. So kids who come into the house know it's there. And just, when your kids come and start hugging you, just say, go look at the fridge, honey. We've had this conversation. Is it an emergency? If it's an emergency, you tell me exactly what the emergency is.
One of the things, as I was preparing for this interview, I started to see a lot of articles about adults and especially children being addicted to these companion AIs, where
Really,
they're forming relationships
yes,
with these AI companions.
yes,
And unfortunately, I've seen some articles and testimonies in the US Congress of parents whose children unfortunately committed suicide
yes,
because the AI encouraged them to.
yes.
What's your position on it? How would you explain how important it is really now for parents to connect emotionally with their children, where you have such a powerful thing as an
Yeah.
AI companion who is befriending their children,
Yeah.
and the children are emotionally connecting to something that is not real?
Right. Or is insidious and dangerous and out to harm them. A lot of porn, sexploitation. So I don't think children should have AI companions. I don't think it should be allowed at all. And, we're coming into the holiday season. Do not get your child of any age one of those AI stuffed animals that are their new best friend. And you can set an alarm that says, wake up now and brush your teeth now and do all these things. It's like outsourcing parenting, basic stuff that are little ordinary moments of connection that are really important for kids to have with you, not with a stuffed dog with a algorithm inside of it. And, the last thing you want to do is outsource your parenting impact on your children to AI. It is so insidious and so bad. I was approached by a company to support these stuffed animals. Isn't this wonderful? They'll answer all their questions. If their parents are working, they can help with homework. No, absolutely not. You don't want a robot who has no awareness of your family values, what matters to you, who your child is, who might be also part of a harmful algorithm that sends them either into suicidal ideation and behavior or sexual blackmail. You just don't want it. I mean, there's no reason for it. And it's pernicious. And that is a huge disconnect from you. If yes, so much of parenting can be tedious. There's no question about it. You constantly have to say, honey, yes, you do have to brush your teeth. We were taking care of our 3.5-year-old granddaughter, and she was telling us great things like, well, I'm allowed to take my nap in my sneakers. No. I'm allowed to sleep with, my favorite trains in my bed. No. 3.5. They'll start pushing back and, playing with you. So it starts early. It stops late in life. Kids pushing up against limits and trying to do things. That's our job. That's our job.
And to look at the family values too. I wonder if maybe so many of our children and young people are struggling because there wasn't any intentional effort to really teach them what the family values are, the expectations, and to just live according to those values. So they're left in this massive world to kind of figure it out themselves.
Yes.
And I wonder how maybe because of that, so many are maybe disassociating from real people to something online to kind of have a connection because the parents did not really take the time out to really focus on, as a family, our values, our, mutual respect, kindness. And this is how we live it instead of the child trying to figure out what is our family values. And I think maybe that's a challenge for parents who are listening. What is your family values? Have you ever sat down and thought about it by yourself with your spouse or even with your children? And if you have a difficult time thinking about it and instantly responding, maybe that's also a conversation to have with children. And I think it will help with the devices too, because if they understand this is a family value, family time, family meetings, family dinners are a core part of our family, and we're going to abide by it, you're more likely to not have as much pushback when you say, hey, no devices, when we're talking and so on. What do you think about that?
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely right. The school that our children went to in Cambridge, Massachusetts, did this wonderful thing one year where they had every family take a 3 by 3 foot cardboard and put photos of everybody, all the generations you had, your family doing the things you like to do, and around it, write your family values. And, some of the things we talked about was apologize, laugh easily, tell the truth, help others, have courage, stand up and stand with and stand for. So, just things that we thought as a family were important. And we kept that in the family room. And it was really cool because the kids could see their pictures of their parents and in one side of the family, great-grandparents who they never knew. And written all the way, all around this were our family values. And that exercise actually forced us, and helped us think about, well, it's not just be honest, be kind, but there are a lot of other things that really matter. And so trying to name all those was really fun and a challenge. And we also, again, asked the kids to contribute. Be nice.
Yeah, and that's a good bonding. That's a very, very good bonding activity as well.
Yeah.
Parents of teenagers, I just want to know that, okay, they will say they're teenagers, they should have privacy. What's your thoughts on parents letting their children know that they will have access to their cell phones to check what is going on? Or they might have a parental device, program or app on their device that they can check remotely what
they are.
Teenagers are Googling. And some parents are saying teenagers deserve to have privacy. But considering how nefarious the internet and the world is, I would really love to know for parents who might be thinking that, what's your opinion on it?
Well, I am opposed to giving a kid a smartphone, a fully loaded smartphone until they're, 15 or 16, because they're not mature enough. They're not mature enough at that age either to completely stay safe and understand and set good limits. And there are so many good phones you can get your children, if they need to have a phone, a flip phone, a gab phone. There are just tons of phones for parents of, younger people where you can decide who they can text with and where they can go, etc. I think that you want to, it's like we don't give kids the keys to the car and say, go drive. We drive with them. They have driver's ed, they have to practice. And I think the same analogy applies with phones. And I think it's important to have your kids understand that you will randomly look at their phone to make sure they're okay and not getting themselves in trouble they can't get out of, because we know that it's really hard and kids get trapped and are too embarrassed and ashamed, which we understand. Don't expect your kids to come to you if they're in serious trouble. They're going to be so embarrassed and ashamed. It's very hard for them to. So you want to, hopefully they will, but you want to have other protective measures. The biggest thing that we need to teach our kids, and the best way to do this is by randomly checking their phones, is that none of this is private. Nothing is private. And, even if they think Snapchat's private or this disappears, it doesn't, because in a court in America, anything can be subpoenaed, anything can be dug up. They have records of everything. So the whole idea of privacy is kind of, of course it's private when you're talking to your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever. But talk to them. But, once you put things in text, anybody can take a picture of it and look at it. And certainly here in our country, if you're applying for an internship or for a job and there are 3 equally competent people applying for the same thing, they will do a deep dive and see how you show up online. And that can easily decide who gets chosen. So, we used to have an expression, wipe your Facebook, be really thoughtful about what you post. But kids don't know that easily. Some kids do, but most kids get caught up in it, as parents get caught up in it and text horrible things that, were better left untexted. And so we have to teach them. So I think these parental control devices are actually very helpful. And I think that, yes, it's really annoying if your parents have a Find My on your phone, but it's also can be life-saving. So, again, every child's different. You have to make these decisions based on your children and also based on your sense of what is the right amount of protective parenting and autonomy for the child. And that will really vary kid to kid and depending on their age.
In your book, you mentioned that you call it a sustainable family. Yeah. Can you just do a quick overview of what parents can do to become a sustainable family, one that everyone feel connected and they feel loved and appreciated by all the family members?
One I mentioned, have a policy, a responsible use policy that you stick to so that the family feels like our family connections are more important than our digital connections. And have all your meals and, as a family, as you described, Taniesha, 5 meals a week is great. Have things that you do, rituals that you do as a family. It's really important. Protect family time on the weekends. Yeah, we're all busy, crazy during the week, but the weekends, protect family time and really think about what you do with vacations. Like where do you choose to go and how do you spend them? Because there are some places people go on vacations and their kids go up one ski lift and they go up another and nobody sees each other all day. It's really interesting to think about how can we use whatever time we have to enjoy one another. The other thing is that children really love to hear stories of their family of origin, where they come from, what the generations were, what the survival stories are, what the immigrant stories are, what the strengths and the courage people who they're related to, who they don't know, had to get to this day. And that is really fortifying for children. And I think the other thing that gets lost often in this era is children want you to be curious about them and what matters to them. So, I remember playing like G.I. Joe type, stuff with my son when he was 4. Was this my cup of tea? Absolutely not. Was that what he was interested in, like toy soldier type things? Sure. So I would get on the floor and play with them. And then as children get to be around 8, 9, or 10, one of the ways we teach them social emotional intelligence and ethics is, dinner can be many different things. Dinner can be horrible. If you're yelling at your kids and all you're doing is talking about manners and homework and grades, that's not the kind of dinner we want to have with our children. Don't do that. All that conversation, grades and school and homework, etc., that should not happen at the dinner table. One of the best things you can do at dinner with older elementary age and middle school kids is invite them to solve your problems. Tell them what went wrong today. I had a horrible thing at work, or I really got scared, or I didn't know what I was doing, or this is what somebody said to me. What do you think I should do? And engage them as problem solvers in the adult world, because if they get to give you advice, they then see themselves as leaders, as competent future adults. And this is one of the best ways to have conversations as a family. And then we can also help each other. A kid could say, this happened to me at school. My teacher said this. What should I do? So use that time to help one another deal with ordinary life issues. And that's a great way to teach our values and to support one another as a family, and really to congeal the sense that our family is a go-to place. And we are here for you for the duration, when you need us and when you want to hang out with us, when you feel you need a little TLC, when you want to share a joy, when you want to share something that's really hard. We're consistent. And that's about sustaining family relationships.
As we get closer to the conclusion, in your book, you mentioned, it's so funny that this was written in 1982. On page 263, you mentioned Neil Postman concluded in his 1982 book,
Yes.
The Disappearance of Childhood, by entreating parents to conceive of parenting as an act of rebellion against the dehumanizing aspect of the emerging tech and popular culture. This is 1982. It is not conceivable that our culture will forget that it needs children, he wrote, but it is halfway toward forgetting that children need childhood. Those who insist on remembering shall perform a noble service. So everything that you mentioned here, like parenting these days, is an act of rebellion. You are the one making sure there's family dinner, there are boundaries, you're teaching them social skills, how to problem solve, how to negotiate, all of that, instead of saying, here's the device to entertain you until, I have time for you or something. So it is so funny that this was written 40 years ago. And now we're seeing that childhood is disappearing. And it's really the parents who are very committed to no device at the table, no device in the bedroom, who are actually in the act of rebellion, actually parenting.
Quite true. Yeah. It's true. And, it's a fight worth fighting.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate that with the advance in technology, the disappearance of childhood, where the adult world is just basically engulfing the children's world, and they're no longer allowing children to be as innocent as they need to be, until they are developmentally ready to be exposed to certain things.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate. I think parents really need to see that too, that between birth and 18 is such a very limited time. Because we're now living towards 70s, 80s, 90s. Think of that. The first 18 years are the most precious time, and you don't want to have them be exposed before they're emotionally and psychologically ready for content. And it's good to just guide and hold on to that innocence for as long as possible. So in concluding, is there anything else you'd like to say to parents? Or is there anything you want to reiterate to them as it relates to why it's so important that even though we're in this digital age, we really need to be in the act of rebellion and parent our children?
I would say have courage. Share research with your children. Like when I talk to 8-year-olds, I tell them, this is what and I show them, this is what your brain looks like. I show them the images of brains playing games. This is what your brain looks like when it's reading. And this is what I share the research. And I also want to talk to teenagers, high school kids around the world. I love Berlin, by the way. I say, look, I'm just here to give you research. You are the boss of your brain. You can do an end run on most of the stuff your parents will do if you want to. You can sneak, you can trick, you can, develop fake Instagram names, etc., whatever. But you're old enough to know that if there is research out there and you're the boss of your brain, if you want to protect your brilliance and your creativity and your success in the future, listen up and then make some hard choices. And I feel like when we treat our children with respect and tell them the why about what we're doing. Why are we insisting you play outside? Because the sensorium part of your brain will develop in a way that it can't on a device. Or building forts with the pillows is so much better for you than building forts on a game. So we teach our kids as we set limits about the why. And when we're transparent in that way, it feels much better to them.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing your insights, your expertise. You saw the change from 1998. And so I'm sure you're seeing like it is getting even worse as it relates to the connection that is being lost, the big disconnect in families. And also that it's even more urgent for us to be very intentional as parents to make sure that we're building those connections and we're bonding with our children And to also remember, we need to be the first person they come to whenever they have challenges, especially with as it relates to navigating the digital space. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And are you on social media? You're not on social media? Okay. So I will promote your book. So for parents who are listening, you can buy her book on Amazon, and all the tips that she provided in the book are still very applicable today. And you can still relate to a lot of the stories that are shared regarding children and how parents are navigating this space. So, I recommend to go through the book and see how you can develop your own sustainable family.
Beautiful.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Take care. I wish you all well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.